Shanna, thanks for being on the show.
Oh, thanks so much. I'm so excited to be here.
So I'm really excited to have you. You just do some awesome work for so many people, and you have a really cool story about how you started your business and how it goes along. I think like all of us do. We've had those experiences along the way where we've had to figure out how to make it work. And I'd love to hear from you to start off just what your entrepreneurial journey has looked like. It looks a little bit different for everybody. So what's that look like for you, and kind of what have you learned along the way as you have, for lack of a better term, kind of grown up in business
hmm
each year by year?
Yeah, for sure. It is really interesting because I started my first business when I was about 22 years old. And I have been an accidental entrepreneur several times throughout my journey. So that really has brought me to where I am today. But backing up a little bit, I found something that I love to do and then realized that there was an entrepreneurial way to do it that I felt that was better than going to work for somebody else doing it for them. So that's kind of how it's happened. Very, very early in my career, I got introduced to the Business Network International, or BNI as it's known internationally now. And this was when it was very new in its infancy. And so I was moving to a different state. I was involved in a chapter in my old state. I reached out to them to start a chapter where I was moving to, and they didn't have any, and asked me if I'd wanted to start one. And so that was my first entrepreneurial experience. I was an executive director, which is essentially a franchise owner for the entire state of North Dakota for BNI as a 22-year-old brand new real estate agent. And
Wow.
yeah, it was a little crazy. I didn't have any idea what I was doing, both in real estate and in BNI. And I think that was a blessing, honestly, because I just did what people told me to do.
What's so interesting about that, and I didn't know this about you. We've obviously worked together a little bit before, and but I did not know that you had been heavily involved with BNI.
Mhm.
And I actually was heavily involved with BNI many years ago as well, but
Oh, wow.
over
So
here in
cool. I
Florida.
didn't know that. It is a very small world, even though BNI is now an international organization. It was not when I first became involved with it. Actually, when I first called headquarters to start my chapter in Fargo, North Dakota, where I was moving, Ivan answered the phone. So
Wow.
if you're familiar with BNI at all, you know that that doesn't happen anymore, obviously.
Yeah.
But
He's not answering the phone anymore.
no, but it was so cool. I got to know him. I got to know a couple of his executive directors, and I spent what seemed like a fortune at the time to buy the rights to start chapters in North Dakota. And
Huh.
that was really my first experience. That was a wonderful experience. I learned a ton about systematizing and running a business and really not reinventing the wheel from the team at BNI.
Mhm.
And moved back to Iowa, took a few JOB jobs in between, but really always had the heart and the desire to be an entrepreneur. And so, kind of fast forward to the last 10 years, I went to work for a company that really purported that you were an entrepreneur in the financial services realm. And it turns out that wasn't the case necessarily. So that's what led to my most recent entrepreneurial sort of passion, which was starting my own financial planning and investment management firm now 4.5 years ago, Heritage Financial Strategies.
I love that. That's such a cool story. And not to make this too much of a BNI commercial, but I do think it relates a lot to people that are early in business, because I wish that I had found something like that. It doesn't have to be specifically BNI, but earlier in my days. And two specific shout outs for me. There was a lady who ran ours. I think she was the executive director for our area, Lynn Coggin, and another
Mm,
lady, Stephanie Robinson, who's still heavily involved there. And I just learned so much from them in those early years, because at that point it was just me and a couple of other team members, and now we're a big agency. But I mean, back then, just I learned so many fundamentals about like business referrals and networking and communication and strategy. And the biggest thing for me was it allowed me to like build my network of people. And you talked
yes.
about, in the early years being a real estate agent and then being in a networking group like BNI. I'd love to hear from you about like what you learned about networking and people, because I
Oh
think that
my.
that's one of the biggest things that people don't realize they need to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I really learned the golden rule, and now they call it the platinum rule. And that is really, when you're networking, is to treat others the way you'd want to be treated. And for me, even as a business owner, giving referrals is far more fun for me than receiving referrals. I absolutely love giving referrals to this day still. And that's ingrained in me from those years of passing the referral slips and all of the fun stuff that you got to do with BNI and the referral groups like that. So it absolutely is a huge part of my success today.
Yeah, I love that. And I think the intentionality behind systems like that, what I always tell people is ignore the system, but have a system. And when
Mm-hmm.
you don't have a system, you got to follow some other system in the meantime to kind of get on board with that. And I know, like, another thing that you and I have a lot in common with is we both love, Dave Ramsey's organization and EntreLeadership and all the
Yep.
things that come along with that. And I know for me, it's like those two things, it's people and process. And you talked a lot
Yes.
about, those people and networking. In those early years when you were kind of the accidental entrepreneur and you're trying to figure out business and all that kind of stuff, what kind of surprised you the most that maybe you didn't expect about trying to run your own show along the way?
Oh my. Well, and I think that to this day, it's still one of my weaknesses, if you want to call it that. I prefer to think of it as a strength, but it often gets me in trouble, and that is my trust in others. So, I was born and raised in the Midwest. I really have that world view that, like, people are generally inherently good and want to do the right thing,
Mm.
and I don't want to lose that, but it's over the years gotten me in trouble from a perspective of, don't I really don't believe most people set out to take advantage of other people. I think that for the most part, it is a overcommitment issue in some cases, myself included. I'll fall into that trap. I'll promise too much and then realize that I've overcommitted myself.
Mhm.
But as I was building my business and looking to those referral sources and also sources of for the products and services that I needed to buy for my business, I ran into a number of people that either didn't have the skills that they thought they did or told me they did, or have this customer service desire and focus that I really thought that they should. So that kind of continues to rear its ugly head, and I'm not going to let it jade me.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I'm glad. I think I almost had the opposite mentality sometimes where I maybe don't trust people enough. I think my pendulum just kind of swings back and forth, unfortunately. I
I
go from
think
like
all of
way
ours
too
does
much
at some
trust
point.
to no trust at all. And it's like trying to figure that out is hard in business. But
It
one thing
is.
I talk about a lot too is like setting expectations for
Mm.
people, I think is so important. What has that been like for you? Because you just said a minute ago, you've had times where you felt like you either overpromised or you've had other
Hmm.
people overpromise to you. How
Hmm.
have you learned to set expectations with your clients and customers in a way that at the end they're going, okay, I'm getting what I thought I was getting versus
Yeah, I
something
think
else?
that's a constant battle for me. And I'm certainly not the best at it. I'm better than I was last year, and I hope last year I was better than I was the year before. So for me, it's really, like you mentioned early on in the conversation, all about putting systems in process so that even if I forget to communicate a certain piece of information, or it isn't quite when I had hoped to be able to communicate it, there's a clear process that they can see. We're starting with, going from point A to point B. And, you and I are both big fans of HubSpot as well. HubSpot
Mhm.
has been integral in me building out those workflows and processes so that they're automated in a way that I don't then have to manage them. So that's really been a lifesaver for me in the last few years.
Yeah, that's huge. Two things I want to kind of double down on that you talked about. One is you said being better than last year. I love that because that's exactly how I think about things.
Mm-hmm.
People always talk about like competition this and competition that. I'm like, look, the only person I'm competing against is me from last year. And
Mm-hmm.
as long as me from last year, as long as I'm a little bit better than that, that's where I'm going. And that's,
Mm-hmm.
and I love this other thing I heard. I think it was Matthew McConaughey was giving some big award speech for some Hollywood thing, and he was talking about having somebody to look up to. And this was like mildly arrogant, but also really good. He was like, who I look up to is myself 10 years from now. And he's like, that's
Wow.
always going to be a moving target. So I'm never going to
Yeah.
get there, but I have a vision of what I want myself from 10 years from now to be. And I was like, that's really interesting.
That's super cool. I think that as entrepreneurs, I still am always thinking about what I want to be when I grow up,
Mm-hmm.
and like whatever that looks like. I think that where I am today in my business is not at all even 2 years ago where I could have imagined being.
Yeah.
But I'm grateful that I'm here, and I'm super excited for what we've got coming up next year, because there's just so many good things in the pipeline that I'm almost like chomping at the bit for next year to start, you know?
Yeah, that's the entrepreneurial curse, like everybody else is gearing up for the holidays and we're all like, when's 2020 going to get here? Let's get moving.
Exactly, exactly. Forget about the holidays. I've got those planned and taken care of. Let's move into 2020.
I've got work to do. That's
Yeah.
funny. So as an entrepreneur, I think that's one of the struggles for a lot of people is um, I think that most true entrepreneurs do not struggle from not having enough good ideas. They struggle from
Mm,
knowing which good ideas they should be focused on.
yeah.
I know that's a struggle for me because I'm like a dog chasing a squirrel. Like when I see a new squirrel, I want to go chase that squirrel, and I have to have people around me that like help temper that a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, how how is that for you? Like, do you struggle with that like I do? How do you
I
find
do.
like these are the things I got to focus on? I'm gonna have to put these on the shelf for a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. So my Achilles heel is really new pieces of technology. I'm kind of a technology geek, and
Me
I
too.
find that fun. And so I am, if I see something new that I think could either make my life easier or enhance the customer experience, I'm more likely than not to at least try to make it fit somewhere in my process. And I've had to promise some key people in my life that I was going to stop doing that, because it throws a monkey wrench into everything I do when I try to like force that round peg into a square hole. So that's always a struggle for me, is when I see something that I think could help me help my clients, or help my clients adopt the plans or strategies better that I have suggested. I want to jump on the bandwagon and make it fit. And that's the blessing of being an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
We get to do that.
Yeah.
It's also
Yeah.
the curse.
It is. It's funny because it's amazing to me. Like when I do some shows like this, some people like they have their own things and they've been very successful and they're not really similar to me. But then like you and I are not like from the same areas and we like have different life stories and all these kind of things. And yet all these things are like lined up between like BNI and Entre Leadership and HubSpot and this piece especially. Like I need like a separate email address just for all the free trials that I sign up for different software, because and my team is like, oh my gosh, we just changed to this other thing. Why are you trying? And I'm like, I know, but look what this can do. It
Stop.
can do this and this and
I
this, and we
know.
can automate that and we can workflow that.
Oh,
So speaking of workflows, actually, that was the other thing I wanted to circle back to, because I think this is really critical for people. And I think it's an area that, you and I obviously have that like tech geek itch, if you will, to want to like try out all these new things. And I think a lot of times that's how you get good at something, is you just go try it. And eventually you
mm-hmm.
try it enough that you're good at it. Some people don't have that. They have a little bit of fear of technology,
No.
and they don't understand how something like an automated workflow could change really their entire business. So you
Oh.
talked about workflows a little bit. Expound on that a little bit and talk about how workflows in general, whatever kind of automations you're using, have helped you kind of take responsibilities off your plate and, if, for lack of a better word, put them on the robot's plate.
Oh, for real. So last year at this time, I did not, it was actually 2 years ago now, I did not really fully embrace this type of technology. I was using HubSpot. I was using some marketing automations, and that was pretty cool. And then at that point, I had two almost full-time assistants. They were between 25 and 30 hours a week. And one of their jobs entirely was pretty much handling the movement of stuff around in my practice. And I didn't really realize the power that a tool like HubSpot could have. And then one of my assistants gave notice to move on to another opportunity. And I thought, okay, this is my shot to replace two full-time folks with one, two part-time folks with one full-time assistant. And that didn't work out so well. I ended up with no assistants for the period of about 6 months.
Hmm.
And what that required for me to do is really, I threw out all of my old assumptions on how things were supposed to work in my business and in my industry, and rebuilt everything from the ground up, from all of my customer processes, all of my onboarding processes. I just looked at everything that I was doing with a critical eye on how I could offload that responsibility or that task to either somebody else virtually, and I had some virtual assistants that I worked with, or how I could automate it so a human didn't have to touch it. And it was one of the hardest years I've ever had in my business, because I spent so much time with my sleeves rolled up in the weeds. But what it eventually ended up allowing me to do is to really automate about 80% of the stuff that one of my almost full-time assistants was doing. So now I don't have that payroll responsibility, and I don't have the human responsibility of making sure that stuff gets moved from point A to point B. So it has literally been transformative in my business.
Yeah, I mean that stuff is amazing. Ultimately, robots don't drop balls,
Yep.
and what I always tell people, and I tell my team this all the time, is we should ask these 4 questions, and this was really helpful for me. I think I got it from Michael Hyatt, but I'm not quite sure. It was number one: does this task need to be done? Yes or no?
Mm,
No, it needs to be deleted and trashed. And number two, can I automate it? That's what you're talking about here is,
mm-hmm,
can I create a tool, use a tool or some kind of a system that will just do it for me? Because then you're
mm-hmm.
almost working 24 hours a day in some cases without actually having
Yep.
to do anything. And then three was, can I delegate it? Not just delegate the task, but delegate the outcome of the task.
Mm-hmm,
And then the fourth one was, if I have to do it, because I've kind of gotten through all these steps now it means I have to do it. If I have to do it, does it have to be now? And if not
mm,
now, let me put it on a calendar and do it in the future.
mm-hmm.
And but that automation stuff, gosh, anybody out there that's listening that has not gotten into that world a little bit, um, man, there's so much coming. And I think some people are scared of it, but I always tell
Yeah.
my team, I'm like, look, there's plenty of work still to be done that robots can't do. Like I
Yeah.
need people to be able to think about strategy and build relationships and robots can't do those things, at least not yet. Um, and and those are the things I need people to be able to do. People to do the brain work. I need the robots to do the automated, repetitive work. And I don't think that's anything to be scared of. I think it's something to be excited about. I'd rather do the creative, fun thinking work and let the robots do the, automation stuff.
Oh, absolutely. And what it's really done in the last 6 months or so is my husband and I now run a completely separate business. He has a business, I have a business, and this little side business has emerged where we're helping other financial planning firms like ours implement automations like we've implemented, because we've spent tens of thousands of dollars building all of these processes. And it isn't something we designed that we wanted to do, but we just started having people come to us and saying, hey, I heard you on this webinar. I was listening to you at this meeting. And how do you do that? And
Mm-hmm.
so we've started a consulting business that's built around HubSpot, that's helping other financial planning firms build the same automations that we've got built, because there's enough air for all of us to breathe. I can't work with all the clients throughout every state and city and town in the country. So I have such a passion for this in my industry, because we're light years behind every other industry when it comes to automation and technology, honestly.
Wow. I mean, we're like a separate clone somewhere, I think, because this is exactly the kind of stuff that I'm doing too, but in our own agency. And because I love, we do marketing work in general, but I also love just the business strategy and automation and all that kind of stuff from a consulting standpoint. It's just fun to help people figure it out. Once they see it, it's like, holy smokes,
Oh,
it changed their life. And it's so
yeah.
cool that like you're now, I love what you're doing with this, because you're basically taking your core business, which is helping people, secure their financial futures.
Hmm.
And then you're going, hey, this works really well. This is a model that could help other people who help the same. And now what you're doing is you're multiplying your impact, because
Yeah.
I think I know you well enough to know that you think the same way I do, in that it's like, we got to have money to run a business and we got to be
Right.
profitable to stay in business, but
Right.
it's not all about the money. And what you're doing
Right.
with this is you are creating an opportunity to make more money, no question about it, but you're also creating an opportunity to have impact on people's
Yeah.
lives in a way that can be real and substantial for decades to come.
Yeah, and that's the super exciting part for me, right? Like I've learned I love being an entrepreneur. I don't love the starting part of a business, but I
Yeah.
love the operations and running the business. And so most advisors and financial planners that do what I do don't love that part. It's a struggle for most of us. So what I do for my individual clients in helping them implement financial plans and financial investment strategies, I'm also doing on the business side for other advisors. And I think that's so cool.
So what you do with that though is you're starting to develop a lot of different things that are going on, obviously, which is pretty typical for an entrepreneur. It's kind of the part of the
Mhm.
MO. But how do you then go, all right, I've got some things over here that my husband's running a business, and then I've got my own core kind of financial business. And then I have this consulting business over here.
Hmm.
And how are you kind of going, all right, where do I need to put my time? Where do I want to put my time? How do I take, because you got these clients over here that you got to take care of and
Yep.
all these different things. So how are you, how are you navigating that? That's
Oh
tough.
my Lord. I don't think I'm doing a very good job of it. That's certainly one of my goals for 2020. My husband made me promise that I would spend at least an hour a day in 2020 without a computer next to me. Um, because I love what I do. I
I
love
know, me
working with my
too.
financial planning clients. I love working with my consulting clients. I geek out about new technology. So it's actually fun for me to spend time researching and doing all of that stuff at 6 o'clock in the morning or 8 o'clock at night. And I realize that that's not a healthy work-life balance, right? So if you have any suggestions in that way, I'm all ears. But my first order of business is really to make sure that I fulfill on that commitment, because that's huge for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I always get to work-life balance towards the end of the show, but let's talk about it now because we're kind of in it already. Um, I was thinking about what you just said, which is that's not a healthy balance. And I think one of the things I really believe, like to my core, is that may or may not be true.
Sure.
And so like for you, if you know that your husband's going, hey, I want you to take a little break from the computer for X amount of time. And
Hmm.
you said that in jest, kind of jokingly,
Oh,
but in all
sure.
seriousness, at some point you get in those conversations, you go, hey, here's what I need in this situation. Here's
Hmm.
what we need for our relationship. What have we defined as our priorities? And I think there are certain seasons of life and certain like, I don't know. I think as an entrepreneur, when you get that fire inside of you, if you love what you're doing and you're helping other people and you're not harming other significant relationships around you, that's
Right.
the key indicator, then carry on, like
Yeah.
that's like Gary Vaynerchuk is like this. For anybody that's familiar with him, he's a social media, guru, I guess is the word, but and he's the kind of guy who preaches the like 24/7 nonstop hustle, but then he really is focused on family on the weekends. That's kind of his MO. He's invisible during those times and is heavily, he works massive hours during the week. But
Hmm.
I think it's just like, is it healthy? I don't know. It's a kind of up
Yeah.
to you.
Right.
I mean, what,
Yeah, and I wrote a blog post about this 2 or 3 years ago, probably, which folks can find on my LinkedIn blog. I'm sure it's still out there, but I don't necessarily believe in work-life balance. I believe, like you said, that there are seasons. I'm about to come into one. Tax season in the financial industry is completely crazy, hair on fire. January 2nd through April 15th. I know that. I've lived it for the last 15 years. And I get it. So I tend to plan, my birthday's in May. So I tend to plan a really long weekend for my birthday because it's right after the craziness.
mm,
And I don't want to take a computer. I don't want to look at a computer. I want to do something where I can completely unplug and I can go back and forth, and that can be my balance. And I'm okay with that. My husband is one of those that he's a bicyclist and loves to cycle, and that's his thing. And if he doesn't get on that bike 100 to 200 miles on the weekend when he has the time to do it, he is not a fun person to be around. He
mm,
needs that consistent unplugging, and I don't necessarily need that. So
yeah.
it's definitely a struggle to figure out the balance for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm very much the same as you in that I do not need to be unplugged. I mean,
Yeah,
that's probably not true. I do at some point,
sure.
but I can go very long stretches of time working a very large number of hours and be perfectly happy about it.
Yeah,
Like I really
exactly.
love the vast majority of the work that I get to do. And so, but I have to temper that reality with the fact that I also have 5 children that
Yeah.
range from 7 to 15 and a wife who I'd like to be married to for my entire life. And while she's happy for me to have seasons and days of intense work, she doesn't want that to be 7 days a week, 24/7.
Of course.
And it's an interesting balance though, because like when I work, I don't know if this is true what I'm about to say. I was going to say that when I work like a massive amount of hours, it's not because I love my work more than my family, but maybe in those moments that is what I want to do more, which is like that's like a very convicting, very open, honest thing that
Yeah,
I put on the
totally.
podcast. But it is like a question mark, where it's like, where do I really want to spend my time, and why do I want to spend my time there?
Yeah.
And that's like I need like a counselor, I think now.
Well, I think that if we were all to be really super honest, I love what I do. My husband loves what he does. I really love working with the new consulting clients that I'm bringing on. And I also enjoy going out to dinner where we don't have a cell phone next to us, and
Mhm.
being able to have a conversation with my husband that doesn't involve a piece of technology or a customer
Mhm.
issue.
Yeah.
So, but what we do in our businesses allows us to have those times
Mm.
where we get to do what we want to do and how we want to do it. And we don't have to worry about where the money's coming from. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's it. Like, and ultimately, like between you and your husband, y'all have to chart what that looks like for you. Because
Mm-hmm.
for you, it might be one date night a week. For somebody else, it
Right.
might be one date night a month. For somebody else, it
Right.
might be 3 date nights a week, or it might be something totally different. And I think that's the big thing that I always take away when I start getting into these conversations with people is everybody needs to figure out what works for them. And they need, I hate to tell people what they need, but they do need this. People need to realize that that's going to change like in different seasons of business. It's going to
Mm-hmm.
change in different seasons of life. And if you're just getting started out and you really don't have any business, sometimes you have to like put the hustle in if you're going to expect to own your own business and expect to build enough
Oh,
business to actually pay the rent, you know?
yeah. I mean, that brings up a really good point. I started 9 years ago with a large big name firm and built that business tremendously, and then decided to go out on my own after 3 years, and really severely underestimated how much work and money it was going to take. That
Mhm.
first year almost did me in.
Mm.
It was awful. And by the end of it, I'm like, this is my fork in the road here. Like, I've done all the hard work, but I mean, you hear those, um, you read those books or you hear those podcasts where they say, are you growing in business every year? Or have you been in business 10 years? Or have you been in business for the first year 10 times?
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And there comes a point where, and that was where I was about 3 years ago now, where I'm like, I can't do the first year ever again.
Mhm.
Like, no, that is not what I'm interested in. So, I had to look at it from that perspective of, if I'm in this for the long haul, and I have to create this business in a way that I love what I do every day. Otherwise, it's just not worth it for me. My value in the marketplace commands a salary much higher than I'm paying myself now. That's for darn sure.
Mm. That's right. There has to be some kind of, other benefit to it, and you have to know. I think people really need to know why they're doing what they're doing, and
Mm-hmm.
I think for some people it is to create a flexibility of their schedule. But then what
Yep.
happens is they get into it, and they realize they have no flexibility of schedule because all they're really doing is working for themselves for half the price, half the rate that they would work for somebody else,
Exactly.
and
They
doing it
bought
twice as much.
themselves a really crappy job with the worst boss ever.
That's right. I mean, that's, but I think that's why most businesses fail in the first year
Yeah.
because they get to that point and they go, this sucks. I'm going to go back and work for somebody else where I have consistent plan and pay and benefits and everything else.
Yep.
But there are the few, and I think those are the people that are listening to this podcast who are going, all right, but I'm in that state right now and I'm not
Mm-hmm.
sure if I can make it. Like, I'm not
Yeah.
sure, I'm not sure if I should quit or if I should keep going.
Mm-hmm.
And I think both of us have been in that place, and we
Mm-hmm.
both chose to keep going.
Yep.
So for you, when you came to that realization that I can't live this first year again,
Mm-hmm.
w- what did you change? What
Oh,
have you done since then that has helped you not let that happen and go, hey, I'm going to get better than last year? Because I think
yeah.
that for
Well,
me is the key indicator.
yeah, there are a couple of things. I kind of realized it when I was at a industry conference. I actually called my husband from that conference and I said, I can't do this anymore. I need out.
Mm,
Like, I really was ready to quit. And what you're going to make me choke up here a little bit. So my apologies in advance if I sound weird. But what I needed to hear from my husband was, whatever you want to do, I'll support you.
mm,
That's what I needed to hear. And that's exactly what I heard when I called him. I said, I need out, and I need you to help me figure out how to get out, because I've just spent, like 2 years building this business and transitioning these clients over. And what am I going to do if I leave this business? And all he said was, we'll figure it out. If
mm,
you want out, we'll get you out. And I remember sitting down at that conference, just bawling
mm.
hysterically. Like, that's what I needed to hear. And I said, give me 3 days at this conference. I'm going to go to just the seminars and the breakout sessions that I want to go to, not the ones that I think I should. And I'm going to see if there's a way that I feel like I can move this business forward. And by the end of that 3 days, I was rejuvenated. And I had hired a business coach while I was at that conference. Like that's what I needed. I needed somebody outside of my business to say, Shanna, you can do this. You've already done it. The hard work's done. Now you get to have the fun. And it was a turning point for me. I'm not sure I'd still be here today if I didn't go to that conference, have that conversation with my husband, and hire somebody outside of my practice that could give me the kick in the butt when I need it, and also be my cheerleader when I needed that too. So I think having coaching in some form or another for most entrepreneurs is super duper critical.
Gosh, that is so such a powerful story, and I think a lot of people wish they had that story, and I think a lot of people have that story. I mean, I mine is very similar. Like this was many years ago. This was 17 years ago.
Wow.
I was working for my uncle in the insurance business because I wasn't sure I could make it work, and I was making Design Extensions as an agency was making about $25,000 a year in total revenue at that point. This year we'll do 2.5 million. So we've added a few zeros since then. But I didn't think I could do it. And I came home one day and same thing. Like I sat with my wife, and in this case, I wasn't at a conference, but I sat with her and I was crying because I'm a crier. and I just said, but in this case, it was actually different, a little different, because I was working for my uncle, but I wanted to run the design agency. I just didn't think I could make it work.
Wow.
And I didn't think I could build it to a point where I could raise a family and provide for the family. And if she wanted to stay home with the kids, I didn't think I could do it. I did not believe that I could do it.
Wow.
But I was working for my uncle because it was going to be kind of a silver spoon mentality.
Yeah.
And I would take over for his agency at some point 20 years in the future, and he would fade out. He ran an insurance business. And I said, I hate the insurance business. I love my uncle, but I hate this business. And she said, so quit and do what you love.
Oh my God. And
I mean, at that moment, one, I was like, okay, I married the right woman. So check that box. And what you're saying is so critical. You talked about having a business coach. You talked about being at a conference, and you talked about leaning on your husband for support. It doesn't have to be a husband or a wife. It could be somebody else that's a close friend or a close advisor, somebody that you can lean on. But this is really, really important, because I say this a lot and it's really resonated with me. I always say everybody needs to have somebody to look up to, or somebody that's kind of guiding them. That might be a business coach in this case. They need somebody that's going to kind of stand beside them. That might be a peer or a friend. That kind of walks through life and is walking through a similar season with them. They need somebody that they're teaching, because I think when people teach other people, that they learn the most. Yeah. And then this was the most important one. This is what your husband was in this scenario, and what my wife was, which is they need somebody to believe in them when they didn't believe in themselves.
Absolutely. I think that's so hard for entrepreneurs, is that most of us, and I think you and I are cut from the same cloth, but I would say a lot of the folks that are listening are the hardest on themselves. Yeah.
Absolutely. So let's talk about two things, because I think these are both really important. You highlighted them. One was going to a conference, and one was a business coach. I think both of these things are really, really important, because I undervalued both of these for a very long time. And it sounds like they've had a big impact on you too. Shocker, because we're like twinsies. Is like, first of all, going to a conference is expensive. You got to buy a ticket. You got to take time off of work. That's really hard. You've got to fly there or drive there. You got to be there. It's an expensive experience. So those in-person events, it sounds like that had a big impact on you. What kind of investment or time allocation do you make to things like live events or conferences for your own continued both encouragement and education? Yeah, I do. So I pick an industry conference and a non-industry conference each year. So, I love surrounding myself with my peers, but I also find value in conferences like the EntreLeadership Conference, or other ones that are similar to that, where it's all different industries from all different walks of life. And so I pick one of each of those a year, and they might be a weekend, they might be an entire week. But I really do make that a priority to get away from my office and unplug
and really let whatever it is that I'm hearing or experiencing land in a way that it wouldn't if I were sitting at my desk listening to some sort of YouTube video or podcast. I mean, it just hits you in a different way when you're physically removed from your environment. I firmly believe that.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I was a kind of a skeptic for a long time. I used to think, like, well, look, I can get all this same education online, which is actually true.
It is.
But you don't experience it the same way because we're human beings and we experience things different based on the environment.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's the same. Like, I love that idea of one industry event, one non-industry event, because I think in industry events, you can get a lot of that peer group mentality of they're all going through very similar things most of the time. Most of the
Yes.
struggles that we deal with as businesses are not unique. Everybody says
Right.
it's lonely at the top. And I'm like, well, that's only if you let it be. You can choose to be around other people who are going through the same things as you. There are millions of other small business owners out there.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely, without a doubt. And that year that I went to that conference, I was not supposed to go.
wow.
I made a last minute decision to get on a plane. We didn't have the money. We built a house, and our old house hadn't sold. And so we were carrying two mortgage payments for a lot longer than we expected to be. The day after we closed on the sale of our old house, my husband was in a terrible bicycling accident and
Mm,
spent 4 days in the hospital and broke his wrist and separated his shoulder, and which took him out of his business for an extended period of time, which meant I got taken out of my business for an
mm,
extended period of time and kind of became his caregiver for almost 30, well, really more like 3 months until he was back full speed. And so it was not on my calendar to go. And really at the last minute, I said, forget this. I need this. I'm going. And
mm.
I got on the plane and went. And I'm not sure if I hadn't done that, I'd still be here today. It was integral for me to really just set that time aside and recognize that that's what I needed at that time.
I think that's really critical advice for people that are listening. Like if you're out there listening and you've not done some type of conference or event, talk to other people who are in similar business to you, or go find a good Facebook group or something of similar folks, or come join us in the Entre Leadership group and ask around, because I know that for me, I've had similar experiences where some of the most pivotal changes in my business have come from being at an event. Because I also think it like clears your brain space up a little bit to be in like a different environment. Uh,
Oh, for sure. I mean, there's just something to be said for removing yourself from where you are day to day. And, I just think that that's really key.
Talk about the last thing I want to hit on, and then we'll kind of round things up because we probably could talk all day, but I'm not sure how long people actually listen. The business coach thing, I think, is the last thing I really want to hit on that you talked about. A lot of
Yeah.
people maybe have thought about hiring a business coach. They've thought about engaging. They don't know what that looks like.
Yep.
How has that helped you and given you maybe a different perspective on your own growth personally and as a business?
Oh, wow. Well, so I've had business coaches pretty much my entire financial services career. And I kind of vacillate between an industry specific coach and a non industry specific coach. I think there's value in both, just like there's value in the industry conference and the non industry conference. But sometimes for me, it's simply that person that is paid to be objective on me and to believe in me when I don't believe in myself, and to tell me the things that maybe I don't want to hear but need to hear. And sometimes I hire somebody to do something very, very specific in my business. For example, in a week and a half, we have our first session with our traction EOS implementer, entrepreneurial operating system.
Mhm.
And that's something that is there. They have a very specific agenda, and it's for a very specific reason. And I'm equal parts excited and terrified. But they're not from the financial services industry.
Mhm.
And that's what I wanted. I wanted somebody that would not get bogged down in the details of the industry, but could give me that education and that knowledge. For the last 2 years, I've had an industry specific coach, and that has been wonderful because I've been able to share best practices and really build systems and processes in a better way that I would not have had visibility to if I hadn't had that program in my life.
Yeah, I think that's just really good advice for people to think about. I think a lot of people maybe think it's not worth the money, but I think a lot of times you don't realize how much work we're all putting in to try and figure it out when we could just lean on somebody else who has already been there or has systems or tools that we may not be aware of that could just really amplify our growth. I think that's
Yeah.
great counsel.
Yeah, for sure.
So, gosh, there's so much to think about, so much to talk about, and I really appreciated your insights on all these things. I think they're going to be really helpful for people as we kind of round things out and we think about, or you think about what you think are some kind of final takeaways for somebody out there who wants to build a business that lasts.
Mm-hmm.
What is something that really stands out to you that you kind of want to leave people with as we part today?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I've learned is that I'm not the best at asking for help or support. I've gotten better, like we mentioned earlier, year over year. And that's one of the things that I think as entrepreneurs we struggle with most is we think that we're the best one to do everything in the beginning. Yeah. And we might be, but as our business grows and as our circle of friends and associates grows, don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it. And sometimes it may not be what you want, but it's what you need and what your business needs in order for you to be able to move to that next phase.
I think that is really, really helpful. If people want to find out more about you and your business and what you do, where is the best place online for them to go?
Yeah, go to heritagefinancialaz.com. And that is my website. You'll see a brand new, beautiful redesigned homepage, thanks to Design Extensions. So, and it's just a way to get to know a little bit about me and my practice and all those folks that are involved in it. So peek around there. And if you want to chat, you have a way on that website to schedule a time to chat with me as well. And I'd welcome the opportunity.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your insights today and for sharing your knowledge and ideas with everybody on the show. I think it's been really valuable for people. Best of luck as you continue to grow. And since we're rounding out the new year here, I'm not sure when this podcast will actually air, but Happy New Year. And if we're already in 2020 when folks listen to this, just keep diving in and find somebody to lean on, like we've talked about today, a business coach, a conference mentor, because it is possible to build a business that lasts. Thanks so much for being on the show today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Hey, I hope this video has helped you with some tips and ideas to build a business that lasts. Make sure you subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss out on the next videos that we roll out. And more importantly, for some awesome free resources, head over to our website at buildingabusinessthatlasts.com. You can get a free copy of my book there where I tell you how I have built an agency that's grown year over year for the last 20 years in a row. So go grab that, buildingabusinessthatlasts.com, and make sure to subscribe to our channel. Thanks. We'll see you soon.